I'd like to begin by thanking the conference organizers for the honor of this invitation. It's a real joy and great privilege to be included in this distinguished roster of speakers, keynote speakers. I also want to say that I'm overwhelmed by the hospitality and generosity of the committee, the organizers. I don't think keynote speakers have ever been better taken care of than we have been. We've all been commenting on that and enjoying that. So thank you for that. This has been an amazing conference. I've learned so much and just repeatedly found myself challenged and inspired and moved. I must confess it's been a little difficult to sit there through all these brilliant papers and panels. It made me want to run back to the hotel and rewrite my paper. Because I didn't do that, but I can promise you that later versions of this work will be dramatically different and much better as a result of all the brilliant work I've heard at this conference. So thank you all for that. So the material I'm going to be presenting today is from a new project, as we always say. This project has taken me into the new field of ocean studies, which is, like animal studies, an interdisciplinary field, an emergent field. And I have to say that my experience learning about the field reminds me of how I felt when I first encountered animal studies, which is that I found myself confronting what looked like a vast cultural disavowal. It was this feeling that I've since come to think of as the Elizabeth Costello feeling, and going back to what Erica said about that sense that everybody is systematically ignoring, so blithely, willfully blind to something that you see as fundamentally important and ubiquitous and pervasive. And this is how I'm feeling about the ocean as a result of entering this field. It's the kind of incredulity that we heard in Jeffrey Mason's talk so many times. This is, how can this be? Well, that's how I'm feeling about how little attention I've heard about this huge part of our planet. Something like 70% of the surface of the globe is covered by the ocean. So there's going to be quite a bit about that in this paper. But I thought I'd start by sharing a work of art that I came across quite recently. And I think it captures something of the kind of fraught emotional context that working in this field has made me aware of. So this is a work entitled La Bohème, Portrait of Our Oceans in Peril, series of sculptures by Mara G. Hazelton. The piece talks about a horrifying discovery that the artist made in the course of a project in which she was collecting plankton, which is microscopic organisms, I want to quote from Britannica, the productive base of both marine and freshwater ecosystems, providing food for larger animals and indirectly for humans, whose fisheries depend upon plankton. Hazelton found that all the samples of plankton she collected, no matter where in the world they came from, were intricately entangled with strands of microdegraded plastics. Plankton produces half the world's oxygen, and this infestation by human waste struck the artist as a kind of infection, a terminal disease. And so the work's title uses Puccini's opera to acknowledge, to bring us in connection with that feeling that I think many ecologically engaged people have these days, be they artists or scholars or activists or policymakers, which is the feeling of realizing that you're in love with something that's dying.
Aspetti, signorina, verirò con due parole, i son, che faccio come vivo. Vuole chi son.
I wish it was longer. So when the object of Rodolfo's soulful yearning is, quote, tintinid plankton ensnared in microdegraded plastic and infected with dinoflagellate parasites submerged in an acidic ocean, the love affair that we're called to witness points to a new interspecies affectivity. And the artists who are trying to elaborate that interspecies affectivity are the ones I've been interested in. So this is the former paper. The last time I had the privilege of giving a talk in Melbourne, I was proud to be among those who were then introducing the field of animal studies to my own field of theatre and performance studies. That was the 2007 convention of the Australasian Drama Studies Association. And I talked about a play by the British playwright Carol Churchill, a play entitled Far Away, which famously depicts a shocking future world where different animal species have begun entering into alliances with human nations, creating a global landscape of pan-species warfare. That play also contains my all-time favorite line from any literary work, which is, "The cats have come in on the side of the French." Churchill's wildly imaginative ascription of political agency to non-human actors, and that too a militarized, tactically devious kind of political agency, doesn't stop with animals. In its final astonishing moments, the play imagines a world where, everything's been recruited. We learn that even the weather is on the side of the Japanese. The Bolivians are working with gravity, and there are thousands dead of light in Madagascar. The speaker ends by wondering, who's going to mobilize darkness and silence? Now that's what I would call an Anthropocenic question, recognizing the profound way that human activities are shaping and altering the geophysical systems of our planet. Of course, I don't think this audience needs that slide, especially after the wonderful discussion of the Anthropocene yesterday by Timothy in launching the terrific new book in the Animal Public series on animals in the Anthropocene. So thinkers like Dipesh Chakravarti and others have argued that the proposed concept of the Anthropocene challenges us to revise or augment existing conceptualizations of the human, going beyond the biographical and sociological accounts that we moderns have been most comfortable with, beyond even the biological that we've had to accept in the post-Darwinian era, to acknowledge and add a geophysical dimension to human identity. Chakrabarti believes that this geophysical dimension requires us to think at historical and geographical scales that seriously challenge the traditional methods and establish protocols of knowledge production in the humanities and social sciences. I've been arguing elsewhere that a growing number of artworks, Churchill's Far Away among them, take up this challenge of moving beyond this impasse, seeking out modes of feeling, thinking, and imagining a more capacious humanity, one that willingly shares agency, as it does its ecological fate, with the other animals, plants, organisms, and physical forces with whom we share this world. In the time I have today, I want to talk about one modest response to the proposal implicit in Churchill's play that the Anthropocene will necessitate new modes of interspecies politics. And I don't want to seem to be apologizing for the modest scale of the work that I'll be discussing. In fact, I think it's the fact that it is a very carefully bounded and small project is part of what interests me about it, and part of what I think needs to be affirmed and understood and supported about it. It's almost a kind of stealth artwork, that uses its smallness and marginality in good ways. So while the version of interspecies politics that Churchill has us imagine is terrifying, arising in the context of a global war that feels, alas, all too familiar, the work I'll focus on is, and you'll be relieved to hear this, deeply invested in finding peaceful modes of communication and cohabitation between humans and other animals. The modality it cultivates is what I'm trying to think of as an interspecies diplomacy. I'm well aware that the concept of diplomacy carries many negative associations and unpalatable connotations. In a recent interview with Bruno Latour, Heather Davis expresses her hesitation about diplomacy as a political modality, saying that it seems already to presume two or more opposing sides. The diplomat, she says, is slippery, not quite trustworthy. Latour agrees, adding, it is someone who betrays. But then he offers this provocative and I think counterintuitive elaboration. The diplomat, he says, betrays those who have sent him, and that he does so because he modifies their values. He or she sees that the official attachment, that is the values held by those who sent him, is not the one to be ready to die for. So this is an idea of the diplomat as a kind of creative traitor or stealthy double agent. This betrayal then introduces a margin and a space to maneuver. The performance work I want to talk about today is also trying to establish a horizon of diplomacy, but it's doing so by acknowledging species similarity and species difference rather than ideological agreement and difference and disagreement. The Dolphin Dance project was initiated in 2009 by New York-based dancer and choreographer Chisa Hidaka and her partner, filmmaker Benjamin Harley. The artist described the project as bringing together human dancers. Sorry, it's getting cut off in the bottom there. Human dancers and wild dolphins to co-create underwater dances in the open ocean. The dances are filmed, most recently in 3D, with the intention of offering viewers the extraordinary experience of participating in an intimate, movement-based conversation with completely wild animals in whose eyes we recognize shared intelligence, creativity, and rich, meaningful, emotional lives. I'll be returning to those words that I've highlighted about the eyes and the recognition. In pursuit of this inspiring goal, the Dolphin Dance project inevitably encounters many of the ethical and ideological challenges that beset even the most benign and well-intentioned of interactions between us humans and the other animals. Indeed, I should acknowledge up front that for some people, perhaps many people, the project will arouse anxiety, and distrust, even outright anger, as was the case with one of my friends, whose immediate comment upon hearing just the name of the project was, "Leave those dolphins the fuck alone." This friend is an accomplished artist, a lifelong bird watcher, highly conversant with the field of animal studies, and deeply committed to safeguarding wildlife. So I don't dismiss his instinctive reaction. On the contrary, it has guided much of my thinking about the project. And I believe it's based in the very same concerns that motivate the dance project itself: safeguarding wildlife, respecting wild habitats, and opposing exploitive practices of animal exhibition and entertainment. I read the Dolphin Dance project as a complex corrective and alternative to the whole shameful history of marine exhibition, the history which results in such media sensations and personal tragedies as the death of the veteran SeaWorld trainer Dawn Branshaw, the history whose systemic violence is documented in recent films like Blackfish and The Cove. The Cove shows how tourist practices like the many swim with dolphins programs that flourish all over the world are implicated in hideous practices like the annual dolphin massacre in Taiji, Japan. Needless to say, I condemn such interspecies violence unreservedly, as I know we all do. But I also take seriously the fact that marine animal displays and interactive programs draw thousands of participants worldwide and seem to afford people some powerful affective rewards. This is one of those complex realities, one of those extremely complicated areas of human-animal interaction, and it takes us straight back to that fertile early site of animal studies, John Berger's essay, "Why Look at Animals?" The consideration of zooesis, which that essay initiated, its bold claim that modernity has replaced actual animals with their effigies, continues to be both highly contested and enormously generative, and demands constant updating. And we had a brilliant engagement with Berger's essay in Anat's talk last night. I'm going to be... I enter the Berger set of ideas slightly differently than Anat does, and not so much thinking about animal imagery, but that moment of animal encounter, the exchange of eye contact that he claims is originary for a special kind of human-animal relationship and human identity. My birdwatcher friend's reaction to the Dolphin Dance project would revise Berger's question simply into, why not stop looking at animals, wild animals? But if the interspecies fascination visible in animal shows and touristic animal encounters is not just an idle, self-indulgent curiosity, but something else, perhaps a deep-rooted and nature-affirming need to be better connected to the earthly realities that our so-called civilization deprives us of, then these practices may be potential sites for fostering a much-needed biophilia, along with the kinds of enhanced ecological and interspecies consciousness that the Anthropocene demands. I read the Dolphin Dance project as a thoughtful, painstaking attempt to navigate the conundrum arising from, on the one hand, what could be a vital need for interspecies encounter, and on the other, the potential damage that the fulfillment of this need unwittingly inflicts on the non-human species involved. The effort is undertaken in a spirit of remediation and reparation, with deliberate attention to egregious past errors, and a willingness to betray the values, to use Latour's term, on which those errors were founded. The Dolphin Dance Project's work answers a different revision of Berger's question. How might we look at animals, especially now in the Anthropocene, when their lives and habitats are so threatened by the activities of our species? The Dolphin Project combines two art forms, dance and film, to provide a rich, though indirect, experience of interspecies encounter. The actuality deficit that the project deliberately incurs, the fact that while the dancers enjoy the thrilling presence of actual dolphins, their audiences do not, is carefully compensated by several features of the project which work to heighten one aspect of the traditional artist-to-audience relationship, that of messenger between worlds. As I'll describe, the work is presented to its audiences within a discursive dialectical framework that balances showing and telling, presence and absence, doing and not doing, knowing and not knowing. This framework could be analyzed via various paradigms. For example, the paradigm of shamanism or the neo-shamanism that many contemporary artists have become interested in. But I prefer, for various reasons, not least because of what I sense from the artists themselves, I prefer to try to think of it and elaborate in terms of diplomacy. I should note that the project artists themselves do not use that term or make that claim. However, their website does have a section entitled Dolphin Etiquette, which strikes me as exemplifying a diplomatic impulse. It says, "We only work with wild dolphins in the open ocean on the dolphins' terms. We never feed dolphins, nor attempt to coerce or train them in any way. As a rule, the dolphins approach us out of their own curiosity. We do our best to be well informed about the most current scientific research." Chisa is actually a medical doctor as well, and so has a science background. On the natural behavior of dolphins, so that we can interact with them in ways that are safe and appropriate for humans and dolphins. We understand that we are visitors in the dolphins' environment, and we never attempt to interact with dolphins if they are resting or feeding or showing any signs of disinterest or annoyance. Understanding the human as visitor effectively reverses the long-standing and fraudulent claim that animals in zoos and aquaria are, quote, ambassadors from the animal kingdom. The Dolphin Project's principles of discretion, respect, and informed visitation counter the practices of violent territorial intrusion that are the conditions of possibility of the institution of the zoo and the aquarium. If there are any ambassadors here, as my invocation of diplomacy implies there must be, it is the human dancers. And this role is highlighted through the discourse that frames and accompanies the dancers themselves. What the project leader and the other artists say about the project in the films, or each time they screen the films for audiences, provides a set of conceptual coordinates for appropriate reception of the films and their imagery. I'd like to now show you a very short film, which I think begins to give a sense of the various kinds of discursive framing that they rely on or avail themselves of as they work. I'll be showing you one other clip a little bit later, but there's plenty of different kinds of footage of their work, on their website to be used in a variety of ways which they discuss. But if you're online right now, don't go and start looking at them now because you won't want to listen to me. They're just so beautiful and so much more interesting. The contextualizing discourse that accompanies the film also encodes an implicit theorization of the project's ideological and imaginative operations. Whenever the artists present the project, they always mention two things, which I read as basic rules and shaping principles of the project. One, the dancers never touch the dolphins. And two, the project team never discloses the location of their dances. Each of these rules, fairly simple and straightforward at first glance, is in fact one of the pillars of an ethos of restraint that the Dolphin Dance project is invested in. Each rule also revises certain pervasive assumptions about the ocean and its inhabitants that are inaccurate as well as ecologically dangerous. So, the first rule, no touching. I think this is a tough one. Jeffrey Mason on the first day mentioned Ashley Montague and touching and the importance of tactile contact in companionate relationships, for seeking intimacy. But here's their thinking. In an early work of animal studies, the anthropologist Susan Davis offered a brilliant analysis of a slogan that SeaWorld had used for many years: touch the magic. Davis showed how the designation of the ocean world and its inhabitants as a place of enchantment and wonder was crucially linked to the promise of tactile contact, a guarantee that here, where you've paid your hard-earned dollars to access the magical wild, nature will not remain a distant spectacle, but will be grasped physically, emotionally, intellectually. The Dolphin Project rejects this hubristic fantasy, holding itself to an ethos of restraint that is also an embodied statement of respect for the autonomy of their animal partners. The Dolphin Project's injunction against touching the animals, even when the dolphins initiate physical contact, which they often do, is especially interesting in light of the fact that the project leaders and dancers are rooted in the dance form known as contact improvisation, which relies heavily on physical contact as a form of information and communication, and where the patterns of the choreographies emerge not only from touch, but from full body contact. In the context of their work on dolphins, the needed information is derived from the movement and behavior of the animals, as well as from a different kind of contact, eye contact. Now, of course, the sense of sight and regimes of visuality carry huge problematic baggage in the history of human-animal interactions, as we heard in both our keynotes yesterday, and as was first registered in the title of John Berger's article. I believe that the Dolphin Dance Project intervenes in that history by locating the use of eyesight within a revised sensorium that arises from a mindful engagement with the alien world and inhospitable element in which the work happens, the ocean world. The interspecies gaze that the project cultivates is shaped by something I want to call an ocean-oriented ontology, and that I propose to elaborate briefly by using the second basic rule as a point of departure. I'm sorry, I'm sort of distracted because all these screens keep changing over here, but I think mine's okay. I should just look at this one. The refusal to disclose where the dolphin dances take place is motivated firstly, of course, by a desire to keep dolphin habitats commercially undisturbed, free of the intrusions from the swim with dolphin-style touristic entertainments. But it has another meaning as well, a symbolic resonance, an effect that contributes to an important reorientation towards the ocean. Through a kind of negative mimesis, it performs the ocean's essential unknowability, its resistance to easy mapping. It stands as a rebuke to the kind of assumptions that came into view not long ago when the lost Malaysian Airlines flight proved impossible to locate. The expression of public outrage and incredulity that accompanied the inability of authorities to find the plane suggested that things like GPS and Google Earth have done some serious cognitive damage, convinced us that we can go anywhere and see anything on this planet. While this may be close to the truth in terrestrial terms, sadly, it is nowhere near the reality of our current command over the ocean, which is feeble, if not non-existent. Now, there are lots of figures and statistics one could use to convey the current undeveloped state of ocean knowledge, but I'm going to draw instead from a recent book of popular science, James Nestor's terrific account of the sport of freediving, in which he says, if you compare the ocean to a human body, the current exploration of the ocean is the equivalent of snapping a photograph of a finger to figure out how our bodies work. And then he presents all the statistics to back that up. The common assumption that the oceans of our planet are now as readily mappable as its land masses is not only inaccurate, it also reflects our profound misunderstanding about the ocean as an earthly environment. Were maritime exploration further along, people would be better informed about how thoroughly alien the oceanic environment is, a fact that Nestor's body-oriented perspective on the ocean emphasizes. He talks about the physiological changes, 60 feet below sea level, the heart beats at half its normal rate. Further down, he says that the organs collapse, the heart beats at a quarter of its normal rate, slower than the rate of a person in a coma, and senses disappear. A space beyond the realm of the human senses, the ocean has also long been a space beyond human thought, almost beyond human imagining. Thus, the names of the deepest layers of the ocean signal this sense of fearful otherness. The second deepest layer, the abyssal zone, is etymologically linked to the mind-boggling concept of bottomlessness. That's what abyss means. While the hadal zone, the lowest one, is named after the Greek underworld of everlasting darkness. These sunless depths are currently enjoying a moment in the media spotlight, thanks to James Cameron's dive to the deepest part of the ocean, the Marianas Trench. But for centuries, they were relegated to the status of a void. As the political geographer Philip Steinberg has argued, the purported emptiness of the ocean was ideologically useful, a very convenient untruth, because it allowed the ocean to be regarded as an empty transportation surface, beyond the space of social relations. This construction was well suited to serve the interests of industrial capitalism, enabling the free flow of goods that has, in our own time of globalization, reached its apotheosis in the commercial revolution known as containerization. That's an image from Alan Sekula's film essay about the subject, aptly titled The Forgotten Space. While the sporadic efforts of maverick oceanographers occasionally challenged the view of the ocean as a featureless void, it was only late in the past century that a new awareness began to dawn of the vast biological treasures of marine life, as undersea expeditions dredged up not only the lost treasure that they were seeking, but also thousands of strange new species. In the words of William Broad, author of the revealingly titled volume, The Universe Below, giant worms and slugs, spindly crabs and prawns, delicate sponges and sea lilies. Today, with marine science still in its infancy, the ocean faces devastation from a host of human activities: overfishing, trawling, deep-sea mining, oil spills, toxic dumping, and many more. Ocean acidification and warming sea temperatures all but guarantee that countless species of marine animals, plants, and organisms will be rendered extinct before they are even discovered by science. This combination of historical oblivion, current fascination, and overarching threat is the fraught context for artists like the Dolphin Dance Project and a growing number of others who seek to perform in, about, and for the ocean. The interspecies diplomacy this context calls for begins with an acknowledgement of the ocean's alien ontology, and thence of the vastly different sensoria of the species native to it and their profoundly divergent modes of phenomenal experience. But it doesn't end there. It must also engage creatively with the immense cultural symbology that has saturated the ocean with meanings, from the time of the ancient flood myths to yesterday's episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. Many ocean-oriented performances mobilize the fact that the amount we don't know and don't want to know about the ocean is matched by the amount we projected onto it. The factual bases of these projections range from the ocean's status as the evolutionary origin of our species, to its frightening role in a future where the coast-dwelling members of our species, which is about half of us, could be decimated by rising sea levels. That range is brilliantly encapsulated in a recent play entitled The Upper Room, in which the realities of climate change were shown to have multiple historical frames: cultural, biographical, mythological. The fictional characters in the play inhabit a commune called the Good Life Center. I think I'll skip ahead a little. The commune in the play is on an island, and the rising sea levels are endangering the house. As the play opens, one of the homesteaders has left the eponymous upper room, where they wait out each storm surge. They spend much of the play searching for her until she returns temporarily, and we begin to understand that she's in fact moved into what will be their collective future as sea creatures. She's transformed herself into a walrus, and we are left to imagine what changes await the others as the rising sea engulfs them. A further mythological dimension is added to this becoming animal. The girl's mother, we learn, was a figure from that most ancient and ubiquitous of human marine fantasies, a mermaid. The mythological and historical material is combined here with a performatively realized foregrounding of the human body, its real limitations and imagined possibilities. The process of becoming fish is figured in the play in terms of a key feature of ocean ontology, the fact that we humans can't breathe underwater. The play offers various versions and moments of what one might call abnormal breathing, although that word hardly does justice to the many striking, memorable ways that the play represents physically, musically, how it feels and what it means for us humans to become aware of our breathing. This is something that all of us, even those who haven't trained for diving, have some experience of, if only through relaxation classes and yoga exercises. While the play invites us to experience this aspect of ocean ontology imaginatively and performatively, the Dolphin Dance Project makes it an integral part of its interspecies diplomacy, allowing it to shape a mental state with enhanced interactive potential. For the dancers to be able to hold their breath and remain underwater long enough to engage the dolphins in dance sequences requires, among other things, that they calm their minds, because the active brain uses oxygen more than other organs. Breathing exercise is the key to this calming. The mental state that results, says Hidaka, profoundly shapes the experience of interspecies encounter, and especially of the interspecies gaze, that all-important eye contact. Now, she's understandably nervous about how to describe this experience, The project prizes its alignment with marine science and is very wary of being thought to be self-indulgent or sentimental or kooky, new agey. She says, I know this kind of focus on breath is common in various meditation practices, but I wouldn't really call what we do meditative. The breath work does affect our mental, physical, and emotional state. I would describe it as a feeling of openness. Hidaka further discussions about the state link sensation and affect, physicality and emotionality. The open state, she says, is also a relaxed one, and our relaxed demeanor and body posture expresses our trust and lack of anxiety or aggression. A sense of trust definitely seems to be noticed and reciprocated by our dolphin partners. Experience flows in both directions, inwards and outwards. The dancer's relaxed body makes her feel calm and safe, but it also communicates beyond the dancer to the dolphin, whose demeanor in turn encourages a creative physicality, a heightened spirit of collaboration. Like the medium in which the work occurs, the dance practice involves circulations and flows, mobilizing a dynamic reciprocity of perceptions and emotions, ranging from excitement to curiosity to fascination to joy. She says sometimes dolphins look at us wide-eyed, sometimes they cast a sleepy, half-open eye, sometimes the regard expresses deep interest, sometimes we are also joyful or fascinated, sometimes we feel a crushing tenderness or even love. To conclude, I want to ask, returning to Latour's provocative formulation, what values does this diplomacy modify? How does it betray previous ways that humans have related to animals? As I read the project, the betrayal happens in two areas, which we can identify very broadly as knowledge production and artistic process. In Hidaka's accounts, the words mysterious and unfamiliar appear often closely connected to this openness. The open state, she says, helps me accept the unfamiliar without rushing to figure it out or give it an overly anthropomorphic meaning. I don't have to feel anxious about what I don't know. So in place of the inquiring mind of scientific investigation, the calm mind of the relaxed dancer affords a tolerance for the unknown and unfamiliar. This acceptance is, for Hidaka, a link to necessary changes in the regimes of knowledge underlying existing relationships to animals. The connection we need to feel in order to care enough to protect animals and their habitats has to leave room for non-humans to have needs and desires we cannot know. Without allowing for that, we start to imagine wrongly that we can manage their complex ecology with our puny knowledge. So the interspecies diplomacy of the project then includes recalibrating the relative roles of scientific certainty and epistemological humility, balancing the known with the unknown, accepting unfamiliarity while cultivating openness, alertness, produces a result. I can remain alert and connected to my partner, continuing to move fluidly together. That resonates with Latour's description of the horizon of diplomacy as a space where peers learn what it is to be together. Paradoxically, the embrace of the unknown makes the ocean less of a void and exposes humans as less exceptional than we might believe. This felt rejection of human exceptionalism is, I would suggest, the bedrock principle and fundamental achievement of the project and its mode of interspecies diplomacy. It's both cause and effect of the artist's willingness to cede control to the other species, even in an area that most artists find hard to let go of, aesthetic control. To use Latour's term again, the artists betray the traditional centrality and agency of the artist, making the animals their guides and teachers, allowing the animals' movements to determine the dancer's movements and hence the work's choreography. By having their choreography emerge from mirroring the animals' movements, Dolphin Dance Project firmly rejects the principle underlying the long history of animal performance, namely to make animals imitate human movement and behavior. Unlike the orcas at SeaWorld, the dolphins in this project are not required to wave hello or clap their hands or kiss their trainers on cue. Indeed, they're not required to do anything except to show up and swim, and that only if they choose to do so. One of the films, and I'll end with this, makes this point in an especially delightful way, enacting a little drama of animal artistic agency. The imagery that emerges from this project is heavily dependent on discursive framing for a productive reception. If encountered as intended in the carefully introduced film screenings, followed by conversation with the artist, it's rich in potential for progressive interspecies thinking and feeling. The heavy mediation involved is part and parcel of its functioning as diplomacy, as is its species specificity. Focusing their attention, research, training, and artistry on one species and one challengingly alien environment, the artists of Dolphin Dance Project bring us thought-provoking, heart-stirring, and politically promising glimpses of how to look at and be with the other animals with whom we share this fragile, endangered earth. Thank you.